now to item 6, which is deputations, and we have 2. And the first deputation, which is on item 11.1, which is the Borough Council's response to the draft Titchfield Neighbourhood Plan. We have Mr. Girdler, so if you'd like to come forward, and you have up to 10 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me. Good to be here. I should first of all point out that the neighbourhood plan is actually nothing to do with what I represent, which is the Titchfield Village Trust. It did actually start as part of a subcommittee of the Village Trust, but eventually we decided we couldn't actually go along with the changes in the Constitution that seemed to be required in order for there to be a village forum, which is the thing that produces the neighbourhood plan. So it became a separate organisation, even though we looked after their money for a considerable amount of time. We no longer look after it because they no longer have any money left. So they've spent it all. £13,000 actually, all of it from the government, most of it going to consultants. So it's nothing to do with us. We're actually of the belief that neighbourhood plans are actually a way for the government to circumvent local planning by forcing various bits and pieces onto the local planners, which take precedence over what the local planners have come up with. It just seems to us a bit... but then the government have constantly, and they've just actually done it again, moved the goalposts on planning, as I'm sure you're aware. The Fareham Borough Council Planners recommendation document is the other one that you have, and that's the one that you're looking at this evening, which is this document that I printed off here. I'm dreadful at printing stuff off. I've got to have it in my hand to look at it. But I should point out that it's a very precise document, and we thank them for doing it. It's somewhat damning. It contains almost as many pages as the neighbourhood plan itself. It's got 39 pages and 150 different recommendations in it. All of which I think really need to be taken into account. It would, if it's passed this neighbourhood plan, and it requires a referendum to pass it, take precedence over what the local planners do, because that's what the government intended local plans to do. Local planning, they said it was. It contains, this neighbourhood plan, numerous aspirations that are actually nothing to do with the referendum that's going to come up. In chapters 10, 12 and 13, which cover getting around the built environment and historic Titchfield, your council survey said that the forum should note that any aspirations related to non-land use matters should be set out in a companion document or annex as stated in the guidance that the government give. Actually, anything to do with those three elements has nothing whatsoever to do with the neighbourhood plan, although an awful lot of people in Titchfield seem convinced that it does. And I think it's a very confusing thing. That phrase that your guidelines came up with is repeated over and over again in this document that you produced, and it's certainly something that we've been successfully doing for the last 50 years, looking after the built environment, various other bits and pieces, historic Titchfield. The Department for Housing, Communities and Local Government say of a neighbourhood plan that a neighbourhood plan is about the uses and development of land. That's what it's about. It shouldn't promote less development than that identified in the development plan for the local area. And actually, in this particular instance, the forum have gone to one of their consultants who have come back and said the housing need is actually 153 dwellings. Actually, your plan here says it's not. They've got that wrong. It's actually 262 dwellings, because the neighbourhood forum are counting some building that's going on at the moment, and they're not allowed to do that. It has to be the time scale, and it has to be built within the time scale you've got, which is the same time scale that you guys have got, that takes you up to 2036. So it's the same time scale. They're still saying, and in a rebuttal to the rebuttal that I gave, they're still actually saying 153 houses. It's not, it's 262 houses. The other thing that they do, and you as a planning authority have said there is no housing to be built in Titchfield. You actually define the village as a small settlement with a rich historic character and a thriving local centre. Few development opportunities have been identified, apart from small infilling proposals. That doesn't seem to me to be 262 houses, but you may disagree. The level of development conflicts not only with your core policy, CS22 giving you the MEON gap, but it also seems to conflict with the government's neighbourhood plan policy as well. The neighbourhood plan policy states that the policy framework states that development plans that support the strategic development needs set out in local plans, including policies for housing and economic development. That's what they should do. This doesn't do that. It doesn't respect the strategic gap at all. It flouts it totally. And they still need to find 262 houses. Where they're going to put them, they don't actually say. They just say they're relying on sort of bits of infill. That's an awful lot of infill, 262 houses. I couldn't infill the village of Titchfield with it. We're currently going through, and your planners were supporting us in this as well, an objection to the plan to build 150 houses off Posbrook Lane. That planning application's gone to appeal, and we will be appealing against it along with yourselves on the basis that it will increase the traffic and various other bits and pieces. We've got two different agendas, so we don't repeat ourselves in front of the inspector. The plan is relying on the fact that they have said we are not going to identify any places to build these 262 houses. And they think that by saying that, developers won't clack onto this and go, oh, you've done a local plan here and it says 262 houses. It doesn't matter whether you say where they're going to go or not. We found somewhere where they'll go. And if we fail in the planning application, we can stick them off Posbrook Lane or somewhere else on a greenfield site. The developers will find somewhere, because if the referendum vote yes, you won't have any control over what the referendum says, because it takes precedence of what your planners do. If the housing element is removed, as we would like it to be removed, and I don't think it is going to get removed because of the rebuttal that I've had back from the neighbourhood forum, then what's going to happen is you're going to end up with these 262 houses going in there, and we'll have said yes to them, and you'll have to accept them. But if it is removed, then what's left is what your planners are already planning and what the village trust are already saying, and it seems to us a total waste of even more public funds to go ahead and hold a referendum on something that's already happening. There will therefore be no reason to waste any more public money on it, because they'll be saying exactly what you're saying already. No need to have a referendum. I don't know whether you have the power to prevent that referendum, or whether government are the only ones that can do it. I have an idea it's only the government that will do it, because they will attempt to actually, as I say, they'll see this 262 houses and their little eyes will light up and say we've got exactly what we want to do from a neighbourhood plan. We as the village trust, if that stays in, will be campaigning against this. And we will be saying to our members, certainly we can't tell them how to vote, but we will be explaining in very short terms exactly why they shouldn't vote for it. So that hopefully, because it's also a referendum that tells that if you abstain and don't go along and vote, then what you do is you actually vote for the referendum. You've got to actually go along and vote, you can't just abstain. That's the deputation. You're about to look at the plan that's down here. I'm sure you've probably not read the neighbourhood plan. I'm probably the only person on the planet that has. Oh, you've done it as well, Connie. Well done. So Connie's read it as well. I've even read your rebuttal, which is extremely good. I particularly like the rebuttal that tells that you don't actually get yellow-throated Veolias landing in Titchfield, because those are the birds that should arrive, but they don't actually. They just hit the West Country now and again, because it's a better holiday venue down there, I think. Okay, that leaves me 2 minutes left. I won't waste any more of your time. I shall leave you to it. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much indeed.